I'm Lou Brutus. It's a pleasure to welcome to the show for the first time, Hardy. Nice to see you. Nice to hear you. How are you?
Man, I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing really well. Before we get into specifics of more new things, give me some background on yourself, even pre-music industry stuff. Tell me about where you grew up and what life was like when you were a kid and stuff that you got to listen to and all that stuff.
Sure. I grew up in Philadelphia, Mississippi. Um, Now I think population 7,000. I grew up, just all American, red-blooded kid. I played baseball growing up. I was about as normal of a kid as possible. We grew up on a town right outside the city, or right outside the town, and a house rather. And yeah, I played baseball. I've been hunting and fishing since I was a kid. And my dad instilled rock and roll in me at a really, really young age. I tell a lot of people my first memory, one of, if not my very first memory ever, was my dad. I was in one of his trucks, old trucks he had, and he put in a cassette tape and said, check this out. This is a band called Pearl Jam. And Alive, as the first song was Alive. And that, no pun intended, really struck a chord. And from that moment on, I was obsessed with rock and roll, and he loved that I love music even at a young age. So he played me everything, and was a heavy influence in my taste in music until I was old enough to watch MTV. And then that was like around the time that like new metal and a lot of like active rock stuff was going on. So then I kind of started discovering rock and roll on my own. But I'd like to tell people I grew up country, but I grew up listening to rock and roll. I didn't listen to a lot of country until later in life.
You know, you've already spoken at great length in different places about, you know, the mix you do of country and rock and roll. Certainly you get some flack for it in certain quarters of the rock world, which to me seems kind of ironic because country and rock and roll have been sort of joined at the hip since at least the time of Johnny Cash, Carl Perkins. So it must have seemed natural to you, I think, the whole time.
Absolutely. And I agree with you, man. They, unless you get into weird subgenres or whatever, I mean, they both make music with guitars and drums and bass, and I think, their fan base is really similar. And for some reason, I've always kind of thought that like rock and roll fans are good, hardworking people, you know what I mean? And it's like a middle class fan base a lot of times, and so is country, middle and lower. And I think that there's a lot of similarities, even sonically throughout times, like you said. I mean, even Hank Jr., Charlie Daniels was considered rock and roll. David Allan Coe even had kind of that sort of thing from time to time. There's a lot of people in country that were considered rock and roll, and you look at the Eagles, who are a rock and roll band that people thought were country. So there's been a lot of meshing the two throughout history. You're right about that.
I've certainly heard from people in regard to yourself. You know, Jelly Roll is another good example in the rock world who are like, that's too country. I would imagine that there are people in the country world that you deal with more directly than myself that are probably as how shall we say, defensive of the home genre.
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, yeah. What is that like to deal with in that world?
I get it. I get it, and I see it a lot. It's most of the people that I work with, like you, the people that are really legit journalists and just podcasters and stuff. They enjoy it, but I see a lot of the people that are just starting out that love to talk maybe down on some of my as far as on the countryside, my boundary pushing thing. But whatever, man. I just use it as inspiration. But dude, I mean, even like the stuff that especially for this next record, like even the rock stuff has a very country lyric, and I have to admit that that's the only type of lyric I know how to write, and so, although it is rock and roll, I think, there's a part of me that just says that that's my version of country music too. And there's definitely going to be some people that don't like it. And I'm a sucker for reading the comments sometimes. And I see some pretty brutal ones in there, but man, I don't let it get to me. I just keep doing my thing.
That's fuel, man. That's fuel
Right.
for the fire. That's what you use it for,
That's
grist
right.
for the mill. And before we talk specifics of the Mockingbird and the Crow, you mentioned your songwriting, and I'd like to go back and get some histrionics on that, because even before you were known as a recording artist in your own right, I think you were writing songs and hawking songs. Tell me about your earliest songs that you wrote, and then how you started to kind of figure out how you could get them to people. There's always a sort of weird story for people who do this. There's no one path for that.
No, everybody, you're right about that, man. Nobody has Nashville stories, success stories are like snowflakes or fingerprints. For me, I moved to town with 2 songs under my belt. I'd written 2 songs, and I was living in Mississippi, and I was going to junior college, and had I had no idea what I wanted to do. And I explored like being some sort of biologist, or like a game warden, or so. I wanted to work outside. But I came to Nashville to visit my sister, who had moved here, and fell in love with it, and realized how music was everywhere, and how much people love music. And so I'd written a couple songs. I moved up here, and when it was like my second year in Nashville, I was posting videos of songs that I had written on YouTube. And a relative of mine who lived in Nashville, named Dennis McCoskey, who wrote some hits back in like the 80s, and he wrote some country hits like in the 90s and 2000s, reached out to me on Facebook and basically just said, come by and play me some songs. And at the time, I didn't know he was a publisher. I didn't know anything. I just knew that I had this cool cousin that had written some songs, and he wanted to hear some of the stuff I'd written. So I went by his house. I played him the 5 or 6 songs, my best songs that I had written, and he basically took me under his wing for about a year. And then more or less, he landed me a publishing deal with his company called Watsky, and a company called Cobalt. But I will say, my first 3 years of writing for them, I had 0 cuts. I didn't get a single cut. And the year I was supposed to re-sign my deal, he came to me and he said, I promise you, if you trust me, we're going to get you cuts this year. And that is a guarantee. And so I re-signed my deal with him. And then at the same time, I had basically connected with Florida Georgia Line and with Morgan Wallen. And just by some chance ended up writing most of their records that they put out that year. And then the floodgates open, man. It took time, and it took a process. And I had to get better, and I had to get better as a writer, and I had to meet my crew and my favorite collaborators, and all that stuff just takes a lot of time for some people. And at the time I couldn't see it, but now looking back, like all of my lack of success happened for a reason, I think, for it to all kind of converge at the same time.
Did your cousin at any time tell you, listen, this can at times be the shittiest business in the world. Are you sure you want to do this?
Yeah, in a way. And he definitely told me, like, you're going to have to work hard, because there's a lot of people that are good, and you're going to be let down a lot. In Nashville, you have the hold system. And so you'll write a song and it goes on hold for me, whoever. And that could have been, a lot of people, including myself, I would get my hopes up every time and be like, this is the one, it's going to be a hit, blah, blah, blah. And then you'd get an email that said it came off hold. Like the artist heard it and they didn't like it. And that happened so many times. And he told me that. He's like, you're going to get turned down a ton. So just be prepared. And I definitely was. I mean, and it definitely happened. And sometimes it was frustrating, but it was all for the better good now, looking back.
The area from where you're from, central Mississippi, up into northern Mississippi into Tennessee, that is one of the richest areas for music for more than a century, going back to, there have been rock artists from there. There have been country artists from there. Most of the great blues artists have been from there. What is it about that part of the country that is there something in the water there? Should I be drinking well water from there, or what's the deal?
Well, I drank from a water hose growing up, so maybe that had something to do with it.
Well, there you go. There you go.
Man, I don't know, but you're right. Elvis, Robert Johnson, who not even arguably, but created rock and roll because he created the blues. And then actually Marty Stewart is from my hometown as well, who's really big in the bluegrass world and country. And then you've got Muscle Shoals, which is right up the road. I don't know, man. There's something about it, and there's something about the South in general that has something really special to offer when it comes to musicians and writers, man. Not even songwriters, but Faulkner and Henry David Thoreau and there's so many I can't even think of them now, but a lot of it's something about it, and I don't know what it is, man, but I'm just really happy to be a part of it. And a lot of people where I'm from, like people love Mississippi. Like I meet a lot of people that are like, man, I'm from so and so, and I'm glad I got out of that shithole. And I've never thought like that. And none of my friends, even the ones that live there, we're all so proud of our town and like where we're from. And for me personally, like that shows in my writing. Like none of that stuff is put on. I truly am proud of where I come from and how I grew up. And maybe that has something to do with that. I'm not sure, but it's a really cool place for music. And it's such a random thing, but it has influenced the world, just those little small pockets of the South. And I love that about it.
Now let's talk specifics of the Mockingbird and the Crow. First of all, why do you suppose it is throughout history, not only with songwriting, but every avenue of the arts, what is the fascination, you think, with birds? Birds seem to work so well in songs, in poetry. Any thoughts on that?
No, but that's really funny. You're right, man. More than anything. I'm trying to think. There's a million songs that has to do with birds. I don't know. Maybe it's the freedom of like flying. Maybe has something to do with it, and they're beautiful. But there's so many animals that are beautiful. I have no idea. That is a great question, dude. Especially like the dove, the eagle,
The raven.
the raven, dude. Poe, right?
Yeah.
Man, I have no idea, but that's very interesting. And my wife, I wanted to say girlfriend, my wife now picks at me because I've brought up birds a lot, like in songs and stuff, and I have like the hawk feather, and I've got the mockingbird here, and I've got the chicken foot here, and she like made fun of me for all of my bird tattoos. But I don't know what the infatuation is with birds. That's really funny.
By the way, this is just you and I, a couple of guys talking. Never refer to her as your girlfriend again in an interview, because if she catches you, you're in deep crap. Okay, I'm just trying to help. I'm not looking to cause problems for you. I'm just saying.
Okay, you got to cut me some slack. We just got married, so but I didn't even call her my fiance. I wanted to call her my girlfriend. But you're right.
She should always still be your girlfriend in a way. Though.
That's true. That's very true.
It stays hot. That way it stays hot. So
yeah.
So anyway, tell me about how the album came out. Tell me what sort of timeline you were on for writing it and then producing it.
So, it's a half and half kind of thing. And I didn't really realize that I was writing a record until I looked down at all the songs I kind of had in my pile with my producer. And we were like, damn, 4 of these songs are like rock songs and 4 are, country songs. And we kind of looked at each other like, well, what if we did, if we kind of did the Jekyll and Hyde thing? And so about halfway through the writing process is when I became a little more conscious of writing. If I wrote a rock song that I wanted to cut, I would hold on to it. And then the next time I wanted to write for me, I would say, I need a really good country song. And then I started going back and forth. And the writing process and the recording process, they kind of cross over a little bit. I probably wrote like half, and then we started recording those. And as we were in the studio, over the next few weeks, I was writing more. So it kind of crossed over. And then ironically, the record was essentially done. And I had 8 songs. And then the Mockingbird and the Crow idea kind of came to me, and I ended up writing that. But that was the last song written and recorded for the record. That kind of tied the whole record together. Before that, we didn't really have an album title yet, but we knew we wanted it to be half rock and half country. But I had written that idea down, and I didn't realize how well that fits, the idea of the whole record. And I threw it out to some buddies, and we were all like, oh my God, we're idiots. Like, let's write that and have it be like the centerpiece for the record. And so that ended up being the last song on the record.
Well done. And as you're writing songs, I would imagine this has got to be the way it is, but do you realize or intend on things to be yours or for somebody else, or just for general consumption of other artists to check out for a song? Does it work that way, or do you just write a song and let it come and then see where it goes?
I would say the latter. Usually by the time we're like a verse chorus in, I'm like, okay, this is me 100%, or the other. There's been very, very few times. Gosh, now I've put out probably 50 songs now in my career so far. And there's been very few times that, I didn't hold on to a song and then later was like, oh, maybe that is a song for me, if that makes sense. Usually I know if it's for me or if it's for somebody else. And but when I get in the writing room, whoever I'm writing with, and most people know this about me, that I just want to write the best song that day. And like I said, like I would go in and we would write it. I'd say I need a rock song, and those were very specific situations, where maybe the producer writer that day had already sent me a few beats and he was like, and this one would work for you. And then I said, okay, well then let's write a rock song that day. But for the most part, when I go into a room, I just want to write the best song that day. And if it ends up being for me, it is. And if it's not, and so be it.
If possible, put me in the room that day that you create Jack. What were the circumstances? Do you recall?
Okay. So first, oddly enough, that was the end of a COVID season. So it was a Zoom write. And I had woken up that morning and I had a Fender, this guitar that Fender tried to put out, and it totally flopped. So they gave all the ones that they overproduced to a bunch of people, and I ended up with one of them. But it was an electric, it was shaped like a Strat, but it was this electric acoustic kind of weird guitar that you had to charge up for it to be electric. And then you take the USB out and plug it in. It was a super weird thing. But I had one, and I wrote the riff for Jack that morning, and I recorded it clean with no effects. And I sent it to David Garcia, who was a writer and producer on that song. Yeah. And I said, let's write to this riff today. And other than that, I just had my family, especially on my mom's side, has had a history of alcohol problems, and she had to deal with it growing up with her dad. And just, it's kind of a long line situation. And I think more than anything, I just wanted to write a song to kind of a tip of the hat to the people in my family that had to deal with that, and to know how much alcohol can manipulate you and kind of have a grip on you and stuff. And I drink. I mean, I drink, and I take it very carefully because of my mom, and she's always told me, like, take 2 weeks off every now and then just to make sure you can, and I'm always very conscious of that. So I'm not, that's not a preachy song. It's not holier than thou or anything. I'm just as guilty of having a drink as anybody. But I wanted to write a song to really show how evil it can be if it really gets a grip on you, and how much it can tear you apart, and the thoughts that it can give you in your head and that type of thing. So we just talked about it and just sat down and just sort of hashed it out. We started from the beginning and slowly over the course of a few hours, just sort of hashed out the story and the structure and everything.
That's a great answer to the question. I would be curious to know, is it harder to stay away from the temptations of drink or anything else when you're on the road?
Oh, definitely. But it's always super rewarding. I'll do a sober weekend or a sober month every now and then. And man, it's just everything about it. Once you get up there and like get 2 or 3 songs in and you're sober, I'm always like, okay, I'm good. This is because my thing is I always think I'm not going to be loose, and I'm not going to be, I'm just going to be more nervous and more in my head. And I never am. You never are. And dude, that Monday after you actually get up and go get stuff done instead of lay around tired and hungover, and it's always worth it. But I try to do 1 or 2 a year, again, just to make sure I can do it. And so far, so good.
Well, from personal experience, I can tell you this. I used to be able to pound them back with just about anybody. But I barely drink anymore. Here's the best part. When you do go back and have a beer or two, you're the cheapest date in the world.
Yeah.
A bottle of Jack is now like 2 beers, and you're like, yeah, I'm good. I'm good. I'm fine.
Dude,
so
I took like almost 2 months off a couple years ago, And man, the first few times I drank, not even from drinking too much, but that alcohol, I would just throw it back up because it's like poison, right? And if you're not used to it, and man, I would have a couple of mixed drinks and wake up in the middle of the night and just throw up. And I was like, man, am I never going to drink again? And, I slowly weaned myself back on it. But no, I totally get that.
Well, it's the same thing. I don't know if you've ever smoked cigarettes, but you have to get used to smoking them, because the first thing
Yeah.
you do when you're a kid, when you smoke, is your body's like, and again, it's the same thing with alcohol. Your body's trying to sweat it out, or put it right back out the way it came in. So
Yeah,
that tells you all you need to know about the stuff.
Yeah, cigars, it's like that with cigars for me. I want so bad to be a cigar smoker, but dude, I can't get over the hump. I feel like dying the next day if I smoke one.
Yeah, the only time I like cigars, now and then, I'll go to Bermuda, and of course you can get Cuban cigars there. I like the little cigarillo ones, like the little mini. They're like a cigarette size cigar. Clint Eastwood would have them in the old westerns. Those are kind of fun to have when you're playing poker. Other than that,
yeah. All right, I might have to try those out.
So let's talk about the tour coming up. I mean, I don't think that there's a ticket available for it, and the thing is still weeks away. That's got to be gratifying. It's also got to feel good on one's bank account when you're going out and then everything's gone. And now here comes the gravy money from merch on top of it. So
it's reassuring for sure. That part is very comforting. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, but man, it's so cool to know that selling out is really, really cool. And to do it before we even started is it's just reassurance, man. And making, it makes me feel like I'm doing the right thing, and that my band and my crew and the way we do everything is we're right where we should be. And we're playing the right size venues and just everything, man. It all just is very reassuring, and knowing that they're all sold out, I will be twice as excited now going into every show, knowing that it's going to be packed to the walls.
And again, why do you suppose folks are reacting so well to things? What's in it you think that they're getting out of it?
Man, I think hopefully, it's the wanting to see the new music be played, especially from this record. But I will say our live show is probably, I think, one of the best ones in country music, at least. And it's just a giant party, and we make sure that every song has the same energy as the last, if not more, and encourage people to chug their beers and throw them up in the air and get crazy and wild. And you're paying for an experience when you come to a Hardy show, man. And me and my band really, really try hard to make it the most fun, like, just party that these people have ever been to. So I think people that haven't been to that show before, they hear about it and want to come, and the people that have want to come back. And we just try to keep those people coming back and giving them the best time they've ever had.
And I would have to think that, well, there are two other things at play here. One, I think there's still folks who are getting out for the first time to a big show post-pandemic. Secondly, there's a steady drumbeat of pretty harsh news these days. It's got to be nice to be able to be the sort of leader of a party,
Sure.
when to get people out and away from their troubles for a couple hours. That's
man. And I think about that all the time, dude. And I think about how, these people, everybody's going through something, man, and everybody is coming to get a relief and release from something, and that they paid money to be there. And I owe them that. I owe them A, their money's worth, and B, for them to forget for a few hours about everything else they have going on. I think about that all the time, man. And every single show, there's somebody that will, hopefully a lot of people that will benefit from the fun that they had and at that show. And I make it my responsibility to provide that for them. And it's important to know that there's people out there that are trying to get away from something, but in a good way, trying to just have some fun in a life that maybe is troublesome at times.
One last thing, if you would, tell me about how you originally got hooked up with the WWE.
Okay, so I have a good friend named Neil Lowy, and he is, help me out, Tracker. He head of entertainment for the WWE.
There's a gig.
Yeah, and I met him in New York City when I played Gramercy Theater or Irving Plaza years ago now. This was like 3 years ago. And he and I just hit it off, and he is like the nicest, best dude I know in the whole world. And since then, he's moved to Nashville, and he's got a beautiful family. And we've just stayed in touch, and now we've become buddies. And so he's just been hooking me up with some WWE stuff, man. And the other day he basically was like, do you want to come be in a skit or be a part of the show? And I was like, yeah, what do I have to do? And he was like, well, you might have to smash a guitar over somebody's back. And I was like, I'm in, dude. And so he's just been hooking me up with cool opportunities, man. And he's a great guy, and it's right up my alley. And I think it's right up my fan base's alley. So I'm here for it, man.
Now, one thing though, it's one thing for you to go out and do your show. You know how to do that. You understand how the structure works. However, when it comes time to do a skit with the WWE with 4,000 bazillion trillion people watching, is there any trepidation? Were you worried about it or anything? Or
yeah, man, I didn't want to look like a fool because I've never slid. I've smashed guitars before, obviously not over somebody's back, but like I knew at that part I could do, but it was this getting in and out of the ring and like making sure that I sold it, and made it look legit. And I just didn't want to get hung up in the ropes or anything and look like an idiot out there, dude. That was my biggest concern, was just looking like I knew what I was doing up there.
I just have this mental picture of you waking up with the sweats every night for the week prior. I had the dream again. You're waking up your wife, honey, I had it again.
Dude, he's coming for me.
Well, listen, it's been great speaking to you, and I'm looking forward to seeing you. I believe the DC gig is the one I'm going to make on the upcoming run. So I hope we can sit down in the flesh and shoot the shit. But I'm really happy for the way things are working out for you, and it sounds like you're on top of the world these days. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we'll have to do something. We'll find a minute to hang in DC when we get there.